It was the 3rd of March, a Tuesday, and the frost had not yet given up the low places when I signed the paper that made me the owner of 55 acres nobody wanted. I remember it exactly because the courthouse radiator ticked like a slow clock, and my breath fogged the window where I stood counting out the back taxes and cash. $840.11, and the woman behind the counter looked at me the way you look at somebody who has walked into the wrong room. I was 61 that spring. I had buried a husband and raised no children, and outlived most of the people who would have told me not to, and I had come to buy the one parcel in the county that the auctioneer read out twice because he could not believe it drew a bid. By the way, wherever in the world you're watching from right now, let me know in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Okay, where were we? The land sat on the far side of the ridge from the town, and everybody in 3 townships knew it as the Kudzu place, because that vine had been eating it since before I was born. My grandmother used to say, Kudzu grows a foot a day and lies about it, and she was not far wrong. When I drove out to look at what I had bought, I could not tell you where the trees ended and the ground began. It was all one green swell, humped and rolling like a sheet, thrown over furniture in a house that has been closed up for the season. And under that sheet there was supposed to be a farm, though no living person could have told you where the barn had stood, or... There was a man named Delbert Pruitt who farmed the next place over, and he was leaning on my new gate before I had owned the land a full week. He was not unkind about it. He had a way of tipping his cap back and squinting at a thing like he was pricing it for the scrap man. "Ida," he said, "you have gone and bought yourself a green ocean." I told him I supposed I had. He said the county had tried to burn it twice and spray it 3 times, and the vine had outlasted them every time, and that a bulldozer would sink in that softness before it cleared an acre, and that the smart money, if there was any smart money left in the county, would have let it go back to the state. I did not argue with him. I have learned that a man leaning on a gate is not asking to be argued with. He is asking to be proved wrong later if you have the patience. Now I should tell you why I wanted it, because it was not sense that made me want it. My people had that land once. My grandmother Corinne was born in a house that stood somewhere under all that green, and she left it as a girl during the hard years and never went back, and she died the year I turned 18, and the land passed sideways through cousins and lawsuits and neglect, until the taxes ate it, and the vine ate what the taxes left. I had it in my head that I owed her something, though I could not have said what. And I had it in my head that a thing is not lost just because it is covered. Those are 2 different sentiments. And I did not know yet that they were about to become the same one. When Corinne died, she left me a cedar box, and in that box, among the buttons and the pressed flowers and the old brown photographs, there was a ledger, a thin thing bound in cloth gone soft as skin, and it was her mother's hand, and then her hand, 2 women keeping the same book across 40 years. I had read it 100 times over the decades, the way you read anything you cannot quite let go of without really reading it. But that first week I owned the land, I sat up under the lamp and read it, slow, the way you read a thing when it has finally got some use in it. And near the back, in a passage about the hard winter, her mother had written a line I had passed over all my life. She wrote, "The land does not lose its shape, only its light. Let the light back, and it will remember what it was." I read that twice. The land does not lose its shape, only its light. Because you can spray a vine, and you can burn a vine, and You can drag a chain across it with a tractor, but all of those things fight the top of the thing and never touch the bottom. And the bottom is where the vine lives, in a root the size of a man's leg that stores up everything it needs to come back laughing. And I got to thinking about how you do not fight kudzu, you eat it. And the only creatures I knew of that would go down into that softness and dig out the crown of a root and eat it clean off were hogs. Old-fashioned hogs, the long-nosed rooting kind, the kind my grandmother would have kept, and the kind nobody kept anymore, because they were slow to fatten and hard to fence and no packer wanted them. I did not do anything about that thought for a while. I am not a woman who moves fast, and I had spent 61 years watching people who moved fast end up where they started. But I had an old friend named Ruline, who had helped me nurse my husband at the end and who asked practical questions instead of foolish ones. And one evening over coffee I told her what I was thinking. She did not laugh. She asked me how many hogs and where I would get the rooting kind, and how I would keep them from wandering into Delbert Pruitt's corn, and what I would do with them after, and how long I thought it would take. Those were the right questions. I did not have all the answers, but a person who asks you the right questions has already half agreed to help you find them, and she did. The county came before the hogs did. I had gone into the extension office to ask about the old boundary lines, and I got a young agent named Foster, earnest and clean-shaven and armed with a clipboard, who pulled up the aerial photographs on his computer and shook his head at the green. He said the parcel was classified as unimproved and non-arable, and that any attempt to run livestock on it would need a nutrient management plan and a fencing inspection, and that, frankly, the vine was a listed invasive and I might be looking at a mitigation requirement, would run somewhere north of $40,000 an acre in that terrain, which for 55 acres was a number so large he did not bother to finish saying it. He was not being cruel. He believed the number, and the number was true if you were going to fight the land with machines. I told him I did not intend to hire a single machine. He looked at me over the clipboard the way Delbert had looked at me over the gate, and he said, "Then how?" And I said, "Hogs," and he wrote something down that I am fairly sure was not flattering. I bought 14 hogs that April from a man 4 counties over, who kept the old long-nosed breed almost as a hobby, red-backed things with hard feet and a snout like a garden trowel, and I paid $90 a head, which came to $1,260. And I hauled them home in 2 trips in a borrowed trailer that smelled of them for a month after. 14 hogs on 55 acres is nothing, is a joke, is 14 small animals against a green ocean, and I knew that. But you do not turn hogs loose on 55 acres. You fence off a piece and you make them work it down before you let them move on, and you follow them across the land, a paddock at a time, the way you would move a broom across a floor 1 board's width at a time instead of flinging water at the whole room and hoping. The fencing was the hard part, and I want to be honest that it was the part that nearly beat me. Not the hogs, not the vine, the fence. I ran a single strand of electric wire on step-in posts, cheap, movable, a 1/4 mile of it that I could take up and set again in a new shape every 10 days or 2 weeks, and I salvaged the charger from a barn sale for $11. The first paddock I laid out was a half-acre down near the old road, where the ground looked under all that green, like it might once have been level. I turned the 14 hogs into it on the 22nd of April, and I did what I had not planned to do, and what turned out to be the whole of the work. I stood at the fence and I watched. I want to tell you about watching because it is not nothing, and every fast man I have ever known could not do it. I stood at that fence in the flat orange light of the evening, and I watched 14 hogs figure out kudzu. They did not know what to do with it at first. They walked on it, they lay on it, they nosed the leaves. And then one old sow, the biggest, the one Ruline had already named, governor for the way she carried herself, put her snout down through the green mat and found the root crown, that swollen woody knot at the base where the vine keeps its life, and she began to work it. And by the second evening, all 14 of them were down in the mat rooting. For those crowns like they had been waiting their whole lives to be asked. The land does not lose its shape, only its light. I stood at the fence and I watched the light start to come back, a torn place in the green where the black dirt showed through no bigger than a wagon. But it was there, and I had made it with 14 animals and $11 and a length of wire. They cleared that half-acre in 9 days. 9 days. I marked it in the ledger under my own hand below my grandmother's, the first thing I had added to that book, and I moved the wire and made a new paddock and turned them into that one. And the cleared piece behind them lay open to the sun for the first time in half a century. That is when I found the first stone. I had gone into the cleared half-acre with a rake just to pull the last of the vine trash, and my rake caught on something that did not give, and I got down on my knees and cleared the dirt away from it with my hands, and it was a cut stone, a real dressed cornerstone, square and deliberate, the kind a person carries in on a sledge and sets on purpose. It was not a rock that grew there. Somebody had put it there, level and true, a long time ago, and the hogs had rooted the vine off of it, and the sun had dried it and my rake had found it, and I sat back on my heels in that torn black ground, and I understood that the ledger was right in a way I had not expected. The land had kept its shape. All of it was still down there under the green. The shape of everything my people had built, waiting on the light. Now the work got slower before it got faster, the way real work does. Delbert Pruitt came back around in May and stood at the gate and looked at my one cleared half-acre and my one torn stone, and my 14 hogs a paddock over. And he did not say anything cruel, he just said, "That is a slow way to clear ground, Ida," and I said it was. Some things you hold. Foster, the extension agent, came out too, because a neighbor had complained about the hogs, though the hogs had never once touched a fence, let alone a cornfield, and he walked my paddocks with his clipboard. And he was surprised, I could see he was surprised, that the cleared ground behind the hogs was not a mudslick ruin, but was firming up green with volunteer grass already coming in where the sun had reached it. He wrote that down too. He said he had never seen kudzu taken down to Bear Crown by animals before. He said the literature did not really cover it. I told him the literature was younger than my grandmother. Through that whole summer, I moved the wire, and I followed the hogs across the ground a paddock at a time. And I want to give you the shape of it honestly, because the honest shape is the whole lesson. A half-acre, every 9 to 12 days, 14 hogs, 1 strand of wire, a battery on a cart, and me standing at the fence in the evenings, watching the light come back to ground that had not seen it since before the war. By the middle of July, I had 11 acres opened. By the first frost in October, I had a little better than 20. And out of that 20 acres of newly opened ground, the land handed me back the farm it had been hiding, one piece at a time, the way you might hand a person their belongings out of a drawer. 4 more cornerstones that made a rectangle when I found the last one. A stone lined well with the cover rotted through, which I roped off before anything fell in. A double row of what had been fence posts, petrified almost, marking a lane. And the low-humped mound down near the spring that I had taken for just more vine, which the hogs worked at for 3 days running as if they smelled something in it, and which, when they had torn the green off, turned out to be a little building of fieldstone, a low square building with a stone floor and a soot-blacked interior and an iron hook, still set in the one remaining rafter, a smokehouse, my grandmother's smokehouse or her mother's, cured black inside from 100 winters of hams, the one thing on all that place that the vine had covered, but not brought down, because it was built of stone by people who meant it to last. I stood in the door of that smokehouse a long time. I will not pretend I did not cry some, alone, where nobody could price it. The iron hook was still turnable on its pin. The floor still sloped to a little drain the way a floor should, for the work that had been done there. And I thought about my grandmother Corinne, leaving this place as a girl and dying an old woman with a cedar box that held the only map back to it, a map written in one sentence about light, and I thought you did not lose it. You only lost the light, and here it is. But I want to be honest about the doubt, because there was a night that autumn when I nearly quit. It was cold. The battery on the charger had died, and half the hogs had walked calm as you please into the neighbor's stubble field. And I spent a wet, dark evening driving them back with a bucket and a bad hip, and Delbert stood at his own gate this time, watched me do it, and did not offer to help. And Foster had sent a letter saying my nutrient management plan was still not filed, and I risked a fine. And I sat up that night with the ledger, and my hands hurt, and I thought I was a foolish old woman who had spent her savings on a green ocean. And I read the line again by the lamp. The land does not lose its shape, only its light. Let the light back, and it will remember what it was. And I understood it a third way that night, which was that it was not about the land at all, or not only. It was about not confusing a hard night with a lost cause. I filed Foster's plan the next morning, and I bought a solar charger for $39, so the battery would never die again. And I went back to the fence. The hogs went into the winter fat, and I sold 6 of them in November, the 6 young ones, for $210 a head. Because the man 4 counties over wanted the old breed back and paid a premium for animals that had proved they could work. And that $1,260 I had spent in April came back to me as $1,260 to the penny, and I kept Governor and the 7 best sows, and I overwintered them on the cleared ground with the grass I had let come in. In the spring, the second spring, I called the Historical Society, because a woman there had heard about the stones. County gossip travels faster than kudzu, and she sent out a young fellow named Anselm who did preservation survey work, and he was the neutral party in all this, the one with no reason to flatter me, and every reason to be skeptical. He came with a device that read the ground with sound, a boxy thing on wheels he pushed back and forth across my cleared acres. And he came with old plat maps he had pulled from the state archive, and he spent 2 days out there mostly not talking to me, which I respected. On the second evening he came up to the house with his maps and his readouts, and he sat at my table, and he was careful the way a young person is careful. When they are about to tell an old person they were right. He said the Fieldstone Smokehouse was almost certainly the oldest standing structure in the township, older than the courthouse, and that the foundation stones I had uncovered matched a homestead marked on an 1840s plat under the name of my grandmother's grandmother, and that by every conventional method of clearing that terrain, mechanical, chemical, controlled burn, the structures would almost certainly have been destroyed before anyone knew they were there, crushed by a dozer or cracked by fire. He said, and I wrote this down too in the back of the ledger, he said, "The only reason any of this survived is that you cleared it slow enough to see it." He could not have said it plainer. He did not try to. He just let it sit, and I let it sit with him. Delbert Pruitt came to the gate one more time the following June, when I had 30-some acres open and grassed, and the smokehouse re-roofed and the well capped proper, and a little brass plate from the Historical Society set into one of the cornerstones. He looked at it all a long while, the torn green ocean turned back into a farm, and he tipped his cap back the way he always did, and he did not say much, because he was not a man for whom saying much came easy, and I did not need him to. He said, well, then he said, "That is a farm again." 3 words. That is a farm again. And I said, yes, it was. Neither of us said anything about oceans, and he stayed and helped me set a corner post before he went home, which for Delbert was a whole speech. By the end of that second year, I had opened 41 of the 55 acres, with nothing but hogs and wire and a solar charger and the willingness to stand at a fence and watch. The whole thing, start to finish, cost me under $3,000 against a machine number that started at $40,000 an acre, and it gave me back not a cleared lot, but a farm with its memory intact, its stones in their places, its smokehouse standing, its well and its lane, and its 6 generations all still in the shape the land had never actually lost. The Historical Society put the smokehouse on a register. There is a paper now, filed in the same courthouse where I counted out $840.11, that says what it is and who built it, and that Corinne's people stood there, and I like knowing the paper will outlast me the way the stone outlasted her. I still have Governor. She is old now, the way I am old. And she does not root much anymore. She mostly lies in the sun, on ground she uncovered, and I do not begrudge her that. I go out in the evenings still, out of habit, and stand where the fence used to be, and watch the light go orange and flat across a farm that a whole county said could not be brought back. And I think about how they were not wrong about the machines, and they were not wrong about the vine. Everybody wanted to conquer that land in an afternoon. I only ever wanted to let the light back in, a half acre at a time, and let the ground remember what it was. My grandmother's mother wrote it down before I was born, and it took me 61 years and 14 hogs to understand it. The land does not lose its shape, only its light. I believe that is true of more than land. I believe there are things in every one of us that we think are gone, buried, given up for taxes, and covered over, and they are not gone. They are only dark, and they will remember their shape the minute somebody is patient enough to clear them slow. So let me ask you, wherever you are watching from tonight, what is the green ocean in your own life that everybody has told you to let go back to the state? What is the ground you have been covering that still has its shape underneath, still waiting on the light? Tell me about it in the comments. I would truly like to know, because I have found that a person who asks you the right question has already half agreed to help you find the answer. And I have the time to read them now, out here in the evening, on a farm that was never really lost.